Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to Sports Speak Live, episode 194. I'm Eddie Kalegi. It's been a while. I've been busy. Tim's been busy too. I've been very excited about seeing the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl. What a time that was. Cooper DeJean, the pick six, Jalen Hurts hoisting the Lombardi Trophy and all of that. But today's focus is one thing and one thing only. My favorite time on the sports calendar, March Madness. I've always loved it since I was a kid, and I've gotten really into it these last 4 years since I've been in school at Rutgers and following college basketball. I wish the Scarlet Knights were part of it, but alas, they are not. And I needed to go somewhere and put my bracket thoughts out onto the airwaves at spring break. I'm not at Rutgers right now, so figured this is the perfect place to do it. And I feel very confident about my bracket, which probably means it's really bad, but I'm going to take you through it. If you want to listen to some of my advice before the brackets lock on Thursday at noon, feel free. I believe I know a lot about college basketball. I've watched a lot of games this year. I was at the Big Ten tournament. I've watched games pretty much the whole season. But then again, it's March. Anything can happen. I don't think anybody thought UNC was coming out of the gates after probably not even belonging in the field and absolutely trouncing a San Diego State team that made it to the NCAA championship 2 years ago. But here we are. But let me take you right through it. All of my picks. And if you want to listen to my advice, feel free. If you don't, whatever. We're going to start in the South region. Auburn is going to be playing Alabama State after Alabama State's thrilling win over St. Francis. Tigers are just going to be too good. No 16-1 upset here. Janai Broome is one of the best players in the country. 8-9 matchup. This is a weird one. Two teams that I think were both underseeded, especially Louisville. As bad as the ACC has been, how do you take a team that's top 10 in the AP poll and give them an 8th seed? Louisville and Pat Kelsey, they've turned that program around. They've got Chucky Hepburn, who's had a massive year, but they have to go up against Creighton, who just made it to the Big East Championship and still have one of the top 5 centers in the country in Ryan Kalkbrenner. And I think that will be the difference. Two teams that belong in the second round. Unfortunately, one of them has to go. I just think Creighton's play style is going to be enough to get them over the edge. Michigan, UC San Diego, one of the most trendy upset picks, and there's good reason for that. The Tritons, this is the first year they're even eligible to be in the NCAA tournament. 5 years in the transition period. I still think that rule is completely berserk because if you're going from D2 to D1 and you manage to make the NCAA tournament, all the credit to you. You should be allowed to compete. It's not like you're dropping down. You're moving up. It should be hard. And if you can make it, good for you. UC San Diego, though, finally eligible. They get in from the Big West Conference. They're going to face a Michigan team that just won the Big Ten. And this is another team that I think was really disrespected in the seeding. You won a conference that has 3 teams seated above them at 3s and 4s and 2s, yet you give them a 5 after they beat them all in the conference championship and were top 2 in the regular season most of the year. And now they have to face maybe the best mid-major there. And I've come from the belief at times that the mid-major that's the trendiest tends to be the one that falls the hardest in March Madness. And some wonder if UC San Diego is in for a reality check against Michigan because, hey, they don't have the same size as Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf, who are 2 7-footers who can handle the basketball. But Michigan fails to handle the basketball at times. They turn the ball over among the 50 most teams with the most turnovers in the country, not just the ones in the tournament, in the entire D1 country. UC San Diego, on the other hand, has the national steals leader in Hayden Gray on their team. They also shoot a lot of threes, and they turn teams over the second most in the country. So all of those factors makes this ripe for an upset. So I've got the 12 seed San Diego over number 5 Michigan. Got another upset right here. 13 Yale over 4 Texas A&M. Bulldogs won the Ivy and won their 13-4 matchup against an SEC team last year in Auburn. Don't see any reason why they can't. Texas A&M has had some flashes, but they're one of those teams like Michigan. There are quite a few teams this year around that 4-5 seed line where their ceiling is very high, but their floor is very low. And while A&M beat Auburn a couple of weeks ago, we've seen A&M fall flat at times this year, despite the heroics of Wade Taylor and Zaire Phillips. So I've got Yale in an upset here as well. Now it's going to go a little more chalk from here. Ole Miss takes down UNC. I think the North Carolina Magic ends here. Sean Pagula is going to help lead Ole Miss to victory. Iowa State, despite being without Keshawn Gilbert, they take down Lipscomb in a 3-14. I like Richard Pitino beating Shaka Smart. His dad, Rick, has beaten Smart 3 times. Of course, they've probably talked, and more importantly, New Mexico has one of the best guards in the country in Donovan Dent. And as talented as Cam Jones is, I think Dent wins that matchup, and New Mexico out of the Mountain West wins a 10-7, and then Michigan State, no 2-15 upset against Tom Izzo this time. Spartans move on to the next round. Down to the West region, Florida, one of the best teams in the country, just won the SEC. I like them over Norfolk State. UConn, two-time defending national champs. Not the same this year, but they're still going to get through the first round against an Oklahoma team that was unbeaten in non-con but couldn't win in the SEC. 5-12 matchup. This is a risky pick. Colorado State's one of the hottest teams in the country coming in. Memphis, we don't know about Tyrese Hunter's health, but I still think the Tigers have enough. They do have PJ Haggerty as well. I think there's enough depth on Memphis that regardless of where Tyrese Hunter stands, they can still get past Colorado State. And I think we've seen times before where teams come in on that emotional high after winning a conference tournament and then fall flat in the NCAAs. I think Colorado State might be one of those teams. So I still like Memphis as the 5 seed to avoid the 5-12 upset. Maryland's going to take down Grand Canyon. Terrapins are really good. Look out for them. 6-11. This is one that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on. Everybody loves the Drake Bulldogs. I think this is the trendy mid-major that maybe has a reality check in the first round because Missouri might be the most underrated team from a historic SEC that sent 14 teams to the big dance. They have Tamari Bates, who's one of the best guards in the conference. They've got depth, they've got size, they've got speed, and I think Drake, as good as they've been, as impressive as some of their non-conference wins in their resume have been over teams like Miami and Kansas State, I think Missouri is going to avoid the upset, and the Tigers will eliminate the Bulldogs. Texas Tech, UNC Wilmington's a pretty good 14 seed, but I like the Red Raiders with Grant McCasland. They're getting a couple healthy players back. And then that Providence regional, you got Calipari, Self, and Patino all there. I like Calipari over Self in an Arkansas-Kansas matchup. This Jayhawks team has kind of been a mess down the stretch. Arkansas, after starting 0-5 in SEC play, have turned things around, and the Razorbacks are playing well. I like Arkansas over Kansas, and I think St. John's, they're going to get tested by Omaha, who's a trendy 15 seed, but Patino and company will do enough to win that one. Over to the East, Duke, Cooper Flag or not, they're going to win their 116 matchup with ease. I like Mississippi State over Baylor, the 8 seed with Chris Jans as their coach. They've got Josh Hubbard as one of the best guards in that SEC as well. I think they do enough against Baylor. A lot of people like Liberty over Oregon. I don't bet against Dana Altman in the month of March. Even when the Ducks struggle coming into the tournament, even when they don't look their best, you can always count on them to win a game or two in March. They will win this matchup. Caleb Love in Arizona will take down Akron, though I do like the Zips. I just think they didn't get a favorable one. If there was another 4-13, if they were seeded in another region, maybe they'd have a chance at an upset, but I don't see Arizona losing first round. BYU, VCU. Everybody likes VCU, but what about BYU? They've beaten Iowa State twice this year. They killed Kansas a few weeks ago. They have had so many impressive showings in the Big 12, which I'd argue is the second deepest conference this year besides the SEC. I think the Cougars are going to get it done and hold off VCU. Wisconsin will take down Montana in the 3-14. St. Mary's, they've had some trouble under Randy Burnett getting through the first couple of rounds of the NCAA tournament. Were upset in a 5-12 last year, but they will take down Vanderbilt and Alabama over Robert Morris, but got to keep an eye on Grant Nelson's health. Finally, in the Midwest region in the first round, Houston wins their 116 against SIU. Gonzaga, 8 seed, but top 10 in some metrics. They'll do enough against the SEC foe in Georgia. Then I got 3 upsets in a row. McNeese, Will Wade, this is their year. They take down Clemson. I think the Tigers are going to go into this tournament a little overconfident with that 5 seed, especially seeing Louisville as an 8. And after seeing what UNC did last night, I think Clemson, little lackadaisical, McNeese takes advantage. And Purdue, last time they were a 4, they lost to a 13 seed in North Texas. We've seen them be upset by St. Peter's. We've seen them lose to FDU in the opening round. And this Boilers team, while they still have 3 great players in first-team All-American Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, the 3-point shooter, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, I think High Point spoils the party and upsets Purdue, and Matt Painter has another heartbreaking exit from March Madness. I think the first round could be rough for the Big Ten. I've got Michigan going down, I've got Purdue going down, and I've got Illinois going down too, just because the Illini, I thought they were really good to start the year. They just really have I- I'm just falling out of love with them. I just think that team's not deep enough. I think the freshmen still play with a lack of maturity. And regardless of who wins Texas and Xavier tonight, I think that team gets past Illinois. Rest of this goes chalk. Kentucky over Troy. UCLA takes down Utah State, and Tennessee will beat Wofford and their granny style free throw shooter. So we go to the round of 32, back up to the South region. Auburn, Jedi Broom and company. I think they'll get tested by Kalkbrenner and Creighton, but Bruce Pearl will get to the Sweet 16. UC San Diego and Yale, a 12-13 matchup, one of two I have in the round of 32. I like the Bulldogs over the Tritons just because of their veteran presence. So I think Yale gets to the Sweet 16, second time in 3 years. We see an Ivy to the Sweet 16 happen with Princeton when they beat Arizona and Missouri a couple of years ago. Iowa State, again, in spite of the injuries, I still think that's a good team, and TJ Utzenberger is going to find a way. He's going to take down Ole Miss. And my other big upset, New Mexico gets to the Sweet 16 as they take down Tom Izzo. I really like the Lobos. I think Michigan State has a false sense of security because of how easy it felt at times in the Big Ten, even though they lost in the conference semis. New Mexico moves on. Down to the West, Florida over UConn. I think that one's pretty simple. UConn just doesn't have the firepower the Gators have. Maryland staves off Memphis. Kevin Willard gets to the second weekend in an old Big 12 matchup. Texas Tech, Missouri. I like the Red Raiders, and I think Rick Pitino is still going to come out strong out of that regional in Providence. That could trip him up, but I think St. John's over Arkansas. Right side of the bracket, Duke over Mississippi State in the round of 32. Old Pac-12 reunion. Oregon gets the best of Arizona. Again, I like Dana Altman in March. Wisconsin gets the better of BYU. John Tonchi, John Blackwell. They'll outplay Igor Demeen. And Bama over St. Mary's. And then down in the Midwest, Houston Gonzaga. I think that's the game of this round. 1 versus 8. I could see this going to overtime. I think this is Houston's toughest test in their entire region because the Zags are just that good, but the Cougars will get it done. McNeese and High Point, that other 12-13 matchup I talked about, I like McNeese getting this one and getting Will Wade to the Sweet 16. Kentucky takes down the Texas Xavier winner. I personally think will be Texas that will win that game and then beat Illinois, but they'll lose to Kentucky in an SEC rematch. And then UCLA upsets Tennessee. Rick Barnes has just had some trouble in March. He's the opposite of Dana Altman, and I think Tennessee gets caught off guard, which has happened to them a couple of times this year, and Mick Cronin and company get to the Sweet 16 from the Big Ten. So we go to weekend number 2, down to 16 teams. Auburn versus Yale, a rematch from last year, but the Bulldogs' magic will come to an end here. I think Auburn has the pieces this time. They know what went wrong last year. They've adjusted. They'll figure it out. Tigers to the Elite Eight, where they will face another mid-major in New Mexico, who I say the Lobos, that is my bold choice of this tournament. Lobos to the Elite Eight. They take down Iowa State. Florida and Maryland, Kevin Willard, Todd Golden facing off. I think the Gators with Walter Clayton just going to be too strong for Maryland. Gators move on to the Elite Eight. Texas Tech against St. John's. This is going to be a wild game, but I think this is a game where St. John's defense shines. Even though they don't have a ton of shot makers, I think they'll get enough offense from the trio of Etchefer and Lewis and Kadari Richmond, and I think they'll be able to shut down Grant McCaslin's Texas Tech team down the stretch. So Johnny's to the Elite Eight. Out of the East, Duke, by this point, Cooper Flagg should be at 100%. And hey, they still have Con Knipple. They got Maluak. They got Tyrese Proctor. That team is loaded. Duke over Oregon and Bama over Wisconsin in an offensive shootout. And then in the Midwest, Houston eliminates McNeese, and UCLA, as a 7 seed, gets to the Elite Eight as they get their second straight SEC win after beating Tennessee in the round of 32. They take down Kentucky in the Sweet 16. So down to my Elite Eight, Auburn and New Mexico. Auburn gets to the Final Four. I think the Tigers, some people are a little worried that they got tripped up down the stretch and lost in the SEC tournament semis. I think that's good for them. I think that humbles them so they don't come in too overconfident into the tournament, and I think that's going to help the Tigers propel and win the South region. West Regional Final, St. John's. Maybe this is a heart pick, but I really like what Rick Pitino has done with this team, and I think they stun Florida, and the Johnnies get back to the Final Four for the first time since the Carnesecca era. Bama and Duke, this one I've been flipping back and forth on, but I'm gonna go with the Blue Devils because Cooper Flagg should be healthy by then, and I don't know if I can say the same about Grant Nelson. Not to mention Alabama's defense has been questionable at times, and then Kelvin Sampson and Houston get it done and take down UCLA. So we get to the Final Four. Auburn, St. John's. I like the Tigers to get to the final. I think this is where the road stops for St. John's, and then Houston ends Cooper Flagg's career with their defense. This is going to be a game that comes down to a late game scenario, but the Cougars defense stands strong, which gets us to the Natty. Houston versus Auburn, and it's visions of the 60s and 70s as Houston gets a national title over the Auburn Tigers. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm really excited. If that St. Francis, Alabama State game is any signal, we are in for one heck of an NCAA tournament. But those are my picks. This has been Sports Speak. Enjoy the NCAA tourney.